What if I told you that the person everyone ignored, the one they whispered about behind closed doors, would become the hero who saved a multi-million-dollar company from complete collapse? This is the true story of Maya Chen, a 19-year-old deaf apprentice who walked into precision manufacturing in Detroit, Michigan, only to face ridicule, isolation, and doubt from every corner. But what happened next will restore your faith in the power of human determination and prove that sometimes our greatest perceived weaknesses become our most powerful strengths. The November wind cut through Detroit like a blade, carrying with it the scent of motor oil and metal shavings that had defined this city for generations. Maya Chen pulled her worn jacket tighter as she approached the imposing gates of precision manufacturing, her breath forming small clouds in the frigid morning air. At 19, she carried herself with quiet determination, though her hands trembled slightly, not from the cold, but from the weight of this moment that would change everything. Maya had been born profoundly deaf, a reality that had shaped every aspect of her life in ways most people could never understand. Growing up in a hearing world had taught her to read faces like books, to catch the subtle shifts in body language that revealed what people really thought. And right now, as she walked through those factory gates for her first day as an apprentice machinist, she could read the skepticism written across every face she encountered. The factory floor was a symphony of sounds she would never hear. The rhythmic pounding of hydraulic presses, the high-pitched whine of cutting tools, the shouted instructions between workers. But Maya saw the rhythm in the movement, felt the vibrations through the concrete floor, understood the visual language of this industrial ballet better than anyone realized. Tom Rodriguez, the floor supervisor, was waiting for her near the main assembly line. At 52, Tom had spent 3 decades in manufacturing, and his weathered hands and permanent squint spoke of countless hours under harsh factory lights. When Maya approached and began signing her greeting, Tom's confusion was immediate and unmistakable. "I don't know sign language, kid," he said, his voice carrying the frustration of someone already overwhelmed by his daily responsibilities. "How exactly is this supposed to work?" Maya pulled out her phone and quickly typed, "I read lips very well, and I can write or text to communicate. I'm here to learn and work hard." Tom read the message and sighed deeply. "Look, Maya, that is your name, right? I've got quotas to meet and a production line that can't afford mistakes. I don't know how corporate thought this would work, but we'll figure it out as we go." The other workers watched this exchange with mixtures of curiosity and discomfort. Jake Morrison, a 28-year-old operator with arms covered in tattoos and an attitude to match, leaned over to his buddy Mike. "Great, now we're babysitting," he muttered, not caring that Maya could read his lips perfectly. Maya's assigned mentor was Sarah Kim, a 34-year-old quality control specialist who had worked her way up from the factory floor. Sarah had volunteered for this role partly out of curiosity and partly because she remembered what it felt like to be underestimated. As one of the few Korean-American women in the plant, she had faced her own share of doubts and sideways glances. "Okay, Maya," Sarah said, speaking clearly and facing her directly. "Let me show you the basics. We manufacture precision components for automotive engines. Tolerances here are measured in thousandths of an inch. One mistake can cost the company thousands of dollars." Maya nodded eagerly, her dark eyes absorbing every detail as Sarah demonstrated the proper setup of a CNC machine. What Sarah didn't expect was how quickly Maya grasped the visual aspects of the work. While other apprentices struggled to understand the relationship between the digital readouts and the physical cuts being made, Maya seemed to see patterns that others missed. During the lunch break, Maya sat alone in the cafeteria, unwrapping a sandwich her grandmother had packed that morning. The conversations around her created a buzz of activity she could feel rather than hear, but the isolation was familiar. She had learned long ago that being different meant being lonely, at least until people decided to give you a chance. Jake and his crew occupied the table directly behind her, and Maya couldn't help but notice their lips moving in her peripheral vision. "I don't get why they hired her," Jake was saying. "This isn't a charity." "What happens when she can't hear a warning shout? Someone's going to get hurt." "Maybe she's got some kind of quota thing going on," suggested Mike, a heavy-set man in his 40s who had never quite adjusted to the changing demographics of the modern workplace. "You know, diversity points or whatever?" Sarah, overhearing from the next table, felt her jaw clench. She had heard similar comments about herself years ago, whispered assumptions about why she had been hired and whether she truly deserved her position. Without thinking, she moved to sit across from Maya. "How's your first day going?" Sarah asked, making sure Maya could see her clearly. Maya typed on her phone. "It's challenging, but I expected that. I can tell some people are worried about me being here. I just want the chance to prove myself." Sarah read the message and felt a familiar pang of recognition. "I know exactly how that feels. When I started here, people assumed I was just filling a quota too. But you know what changed their minds? Results. Show them what you can do, and the noise stops mattering." "The noise," Maya typed back with a small smile, "is one thing I don't have to worry about." Sarah laughed despite herself. "I guess that's one advantage." As the afternoon wore on, Maya shadowed Sarah through various quality control procedures. She watched intently as Sarah used precision measuring instruments, taking notes in a small notebook she carried everywhere. What struck Sarah was Maya's attention to detail. She noticed things that others missed, inconsistencies in surface finishes, slight variations in measurements that fell within acceptable ranges but might indicate developing problems. The day's biggest challenge came when Tom assigned Maya to work alongside Jake on a routine maintenance task. Jake's frustration was immediate and obvious as he realized he would need to communicate differently. "This is ridiculous," he muttered, then raised his voice as if volume could somehow bridge the communication gap. "How am I supposed to train someone who can't hear me?" Maya stepped forward and touched his arm gently to get his attention. When Jake looked at her, she pointed to her eyes, then to his lips, and nodded encouragingly. She was telling him she could understand if he just spoke normally while facing her. Jake, feeling awkward and out of his element, began explaining the maintenance procedure while exaggerating his lip movements. Maya followed along, asking clarifying questions by typing on her phone when necessary. What Jake didn't expect was how quickly she picked up the technical aspects of the work. "Wait," Jake said, pausing mid-explanation as Maya made an adjustment to the machine setup. "How did you know to do that?" Maya typed, "I noticed the alignment was slightly off from what you showed me earlier. The visual indicators don't match." Jake checked her work and found she was right. It was a small detail, but one that would have caused problems if left uncorrected. For the first time since Maya's arrival, Jake looked at her with something other than skepticism. "Huh," he said almost to himself. "Good catch." As the shift neared its end, Maya helped clean and organize the work area with a thoroughness that impressed even the most experienced workers. She had memorized the location of every tool, noticed which equipment showed signs of wear, and had already begun to understand the complex relationships between the various manufacturing processes. Tom approached Sarah as the workers prepared to leave. "How did she do today?" "Better than I expected," Sarah admitted. "She pays attention to details that others miss. I think she might surprise us." Tom nodded slowly. "Well, we'll see. Tomorrow we'll put her on some actual production work. That's where we'll really find out what she can do." As Maya gathered her things and prepared to leave, she felt the weight of dozens of eyes upon her. Some were curious, others skeptical, and a few were openly hostile. But she had survived her first day, and more importantly, she had begun to understand the rhythm of this place. Walking back through those factory gates, Maya looked up at the Detroit skyline, its buildings silhouetted against the orange sunset. Somewhere in one of those towers, company executives were probably looking at spreadsheets, unaware that their newest apprentice had just spotted 3 potential quality issues that could save them thousands of dollars in the coming weeks. Maya didn't know it yet, but her journey was about to intersect with a crisis that would test not just her technical skills, but her ability to communicate the most important message of her life to people who had already decided she didn't belong. The November wind continued to blow through the Motor City, carrying with it the promise of challenges ahead and the whisper of changes no one could yet imagine. 3 weeks had passed since Maya's arrival at Precision Manufacturing, and the early December snow now blanketed Detroit in a pristine white that would soon turn to gray slush under the weight of industry. Maya had settled into a routine that began each morning at 5:30 a.m. with coffee and her grandmother's traditional Chinese breakfast, followed by the 40-minute bus ride through neighborhoods that told the story of Detroit's rise, fall, and ongoing struggle for renewal. The factory had become familiar territory now. Maya knew which machines hummed with perfect efficiency, and which ones had subtle irregularities in their vibrations. She had memorized the walking patterns of her co-workers, learned to read the shift changes in their body language that indicated stress, fatigue, or satisfaction with their work. Most importantly, she had begun to earn a grudging respect from some of her colleagues. Sarah Kim had become not just a mentor, but something approaching a friend. During their lunch breaks, they had developed an efficient communication system that combined lip reading, basic sign language that Sarah was learning from YouTube videos, and their phones for more complex discussions. Sarah had been impressed by Maya's rapid advancement in understanding quality control principles, but she had also noticed something else. Maya saw patterns that others missed. "Look at this," Maya typed on her phone during their Tuesday lunch break, showing Sarah her notebook filled with detailed observations. "I've been tracking the temperature variations in Building C, and there's a correlation with the surface finish quality on the engine components we produce between 2 p.m. and 4 p.m. Sarah studied the charts Maya had drawn by hand, complete with temperature readings, humidity levels, and detailed quality measurements. The correlation was undeniable, and it was something that should have been caught by their sophisticated monitoring systems. "Maya, this is incredible work," Sarah said, making sure to face her directly. "Have you shown this to anyone else?" Maya shook her head. "I wasn't sure if it was my place. I'm just an apprentice." "This isn't about your title," Sarah replied firmly. "This is about preventing defects before they happen." "We need to get this to Tom." But when they approached Tom Rodriguez with Maya's findings, his reaction was mixed with the frustration of a man juggling too many responsibilities. "Look, I appreciate the initiative," Tom said, glancing quickly at Maya's notebook without really studying it. "But we've got climate control systems that cost more than my annual salary. If there was a temperature issue, the computers would catch it." Maya started to type a response, but Tom was already walking away, called to address a problem on the production line. Sarah watched him go with a familiar sense of disappointment. She had seen good ideas dismissed before simply because they came from unexpected sources. Meanwhile, Jake Morrison was experiencing his own transformation regarding Maya. What had started as skepticism had gradually shifted to curiosity, and then to something approaching admiration. Maya's ability to spot mechanical issues before they became serious problems had saved his team several hours of downtime over the past few weeks. "I'll admit it," Jake said to Mike during their coffee break. "The deaf girl has skills. Yesterday, she caught a bearing issue in Machine 7 just by watching how the metal shavings were falling, saved us a major breakdown." Mike, who had been slower to warm to Maya's presence, was still struggling with his own discomfort. "I just don't know how to act around her, you know? I'm afraid I'm going to say something wrong or make her feel bad." "Just treat her like anyone else," Jake suggested. "She's not fragile. Hell, she might be tougher than any of us." This conversation would prove prophetic sooner than either man realized. The crisis began on a Thursday morning when the overnight shift reported a batch of defective components that had somehow passed through initial quality control. $20,000 worth of precision engine parts would need to be scrapped, and worse, similar defects were appearing across multiple production lines. Tom Rodriguez stood in the conference room at 7 a.m., facing a group of increasingly agitated managers and engineers. The room smelled of stale coffee and the stress sweat of people who knew their jobs might be on the line. "We need answers," said Jennifer Walsh, the plant manager, a 48-year-old woman whose calm demeanor masked a razor-sharp mind for troubleshooting. "This is the third quality issue in 2 months. Corporate is asking serious questions about our processes." The head of quality assurance, Dr. Richard Chen, no relation to Maya, had his laptop open, displaying charts and graphs that painted a troubling picture. "The defects appear random," he said, adjusting his glasses. "No single machine, no single shift, no obvious pattern. It's like the problems are appearing and disappearing without cause." Maya, who had been cleaning machines nearby, couldn't help but overhear the conversation through the conference room's glass walls. She watched their lips, saw the frustration in their gestures, and felt a growing sense of urgency. The patterns they couldn't see were crystal clear to her, but how could she make them understand? During her lunch break, Maya made a decision that would change everything. She spent the entire 30 minutes creating a comprehensive visual presentation in her notebook, combining all her observations from the past 3 weeks into a coherent theory. Temperature fluctuations, humidity changes, air pressure variations, even the subtle differences in how workers moved through the facility depending on weather conditions. Maya had been unconsciously collecting data that the company's expensive monitoring systems were missing. When Sarah returned from her lunch, she found Maya waiting with an expression of determined intensity. "I know what's causing the defects," Maya typed, "but I need your help to explain it to them." Sarah read Maya's analysis, and her eyes widened with recognition. Maya had identified a complex interaction between environmental factors and machine performance that created brief windows of instability, windows so short that the automated systems couldn't detect them, but long enough to affect product quality. "Maya, this is brilliant," Sarah said. "But how did you see what the computers couldn't?" Maya typed, "Because I watch everything. I see the vibrations in the coffee cups when the air conditioning cycles. I notice when people walk differently because the floor feels different. The machines don't know they're having problems, but I can see when they're uncomfortable." That afternoon, Sarah convinced Tom to give Maya 5 minutes to present her theory. Tom, facing increasing pressure from management, was desperate enough to listen to anyone with ideas. Maya stood in front of the same conference room where she had overheard the morning's crisis meeting. Her hands shook slightly as she opened her notebook, but her voice was steady as she began to sign while Sarah translated. "Maya has identified a correlation between environmental factors and quality issues," Sarah began, as Maya pointed to her hand-drawn charts. "The defects occur during specific combinations of temperature, humidity, and air pressure that create micro-instabilities in machine performance." Dr. Chen leaned forward, his interest piqued despite his skepticism. "Our monitoring systems would detect temperature variations," Maya typed quickly, and Sarah read. "She says the variations are within acceptable parameters individually, but their interaction creates cumulative effects that fall below the threshold of individual sensors." Jennifer Walsh studied Maya's charts with growing fascination. As someone who had worked her way up from the factory floor, she understood the value of human observation over technological systems. "These patterns," Jennifer said, pointing to Maya's notebook, "they're incredibly detailed." "How long have you been collecting this data?" Maya typed, "Every day since I started. I notice things because I have to. I can't hear problems, so I learn to see them." Tom, who had initially dismissed Maya's observations, now found himself studying her work with growing amazement. "If this is accurate, we could predict quality issues before they happen." "It is accurate," Sarah said firmly. "Maya spotted the bearing problem in Machine 7, the alignment issue in the assembly line, and the temperature correlation in Building C. Every observation has been correct." Dr. Chen was running calculations on his laptop, comparing Maya's predictions with historical quality data. "This is remarkable," he admitted. "Her predictions align with quality issues going back 6 months. Issues we attributed to random variation. Jennifer Walsh made a decision that would ripple through the entire company. Maya, I want you to work directly with our quality assurance team. If you can help us prevent defects instead of just catching them after they happen, you'll save this company millions of dollars." Maya's eyes widened with surprise and something that might have been tears. She typed, "Are you sure? I'm just an apprentice." "You're a problem solver," Jennifer replied. "And right now, that's exactly what we need." Jake Morrison, who had been watching from the factory floor, saw Maya emerge from the conference room with the expression he had never seen before, pure joy mixed with vindication. When she passed his workstation, he gave her a thumbs up and a genuine smile. "Looks like you showed them," he said, making sure she could see his lips clearly. Maya typed on her phone and showed him the screen. "We showed them. Thank you for giving me a chance." As the afternoon shift continued, word spread quickly through the factory floor. The deaf apprentice, who some had dismissed as a diversity hire, had just potentially saved the company from a crisis that could have cost hundreds of jobs. Workers who had previously avoided eye contact now nodded respectfully as she passed. That evening, as Maya prepared to leave, Sarah approached with news that would set the stage for the final chapter of this incredible story. "Maya," Sarah said, "Jennifer wants you to present your findings to the corporate executives next week. They're flying in from headquarters to understand how a 19-year-old apprentice solved problems that their million-dollar systems couldn't detect." Maya stared at her phone for a long moment before typing. "Will you help me prepare? I've never spoken to executives before." "We'll all help you," Sarah replied. "You've earned this moment." As Maya walked through the factory gates that evening, the December snow continued to fall on Detroit. But for the first time since arriving at Precision Manufacturing, she felt the warmth of belonging, of being valued for exactly who she was. The young woman who had been ridiculed and underestimated was about to face the biggest presentation of her life. The question now was whether she could convince a room full of corporate executives that sometimes the most important insights come from the people everyone expects to contribute the least. The corporate headquarters of Precision Manufacturing in downtown Detroit occupied 3 floors of a gleaming glass tower that stood in stark contrast to the surrounding buildings, contrast to the industrial landscape where Maya had spent the past month learning her craft. On this cold Monday morning in mid-December, she stood in the marble-clad lobby wearing her best interview clothes and carrying a leather portfolio that Sarah had bought for her over the weekend. Maya's hands trembled slightly as she signed in at the security desk, not from nervousness, but from the magnitude of what was about to happen. In 20 minutes, she would present her findings to a room full of executives, including the Vice President of Operations, the Chief Quality Officer, and the CEO himself. These were people who made decisions affecting thousands of employees and millions of dollars in revenue. Sarah Kim stood beside her, equally nervous but trying to project confidence. Over the past week, they had worked every evening to prepare Maya's presentation, translating her intuitive observations into formal business language while maintaining the clarity of her insights. "Remember," Sarah said, making sure Maya could read her lips clearly, "they invited you here because you solved a problem they couldn't. You belong in this room." Jennifer Walsh met them at the elevator, her usual calm demeanor showing slight cracks of tension. As the plant manager, she was staking her career on Maya's findings, and she knew that if this presentation went poorly, it would reflect on her judgment. "The executives arrived an hour ago," Jennifer explained, as they rode to the 23rd floor. "I've given them a preliminary briefing, but they want to hear directly from you, Maya. They're particularly interested in how you identified patterns that our automated systems missed." The conference room was intimidating in its corporate perfection. Polished mahogany table, leather chairs, floor-to-ceiling windows offering a panoramic view of Detroit's skyline. Maya had never been in a space like this, where every detail spoke of power and authority. 5 executives were already seated when Maya entered. At the head of the table sat Richard Morrison, the CEO, a man in his early 60s whose reputation for demanding excellence was legendary throughout the company. To his right was Dr. Amanda Foster, the Chief Quality Officer, a woman whose PhD in industrial engineering was matched by her practical experience in manufacturing. The others were various vice presidents whose decisions shaped the daily lives of thousands of employees. "Ms. Chen," Richard Morrison said, standing to greet her, "Jennifer tells us you've made some remarkable observations about our quality control processes. We're very interested to hear your insights." Maya felt the weight of their attention as she moved to the front of the room. A large monitor had been set up for her presentation, but Maya had requested to use physical charts and diagrams, tools that allowed her to maintain eye contact with her audience while presenting. Sarah took a seat nearby, ready to assist with interpretation if needed, but Maya had insisted on trying to communicate as directly as possible. She had been practicing her speech for days, working to modulate her voice in ways that would be clear to hearing audiences. "Thank you for this opportunity," Maya began, her voice steady despite her racing heart. "I know my communication style is different, but I hope you'll focus on the message rather than the messenger." She began with the charts she had created by hand, detailed observations of temperature, humidity, vibrations, and worker movement patterns. What had started as a curious apprentice's notes had evolved into a comprehensive analysis of manufacturing environment dynamics. "Traditional monitoring systems track individual variables," Maya explained, pointing to her first chart. "But they don't see relationships between variables that create brief instability windows. Because I observe without hearing, I notice visual patterns that happen too quickly for computer sensors to correlate." Dr. Foster leaned forward with interest. "Can you give us a specific example?" Maya moved to her second chart, which showed the correlation between afternoon temperature shifts and surface finish quality. Between 2 p.m. and 4 p.m., building temperature rises 2.3 degrees due to solar heating. This causes expansion in machine components of 0.0003 inches within tolerance individually. But simultaneously, afternoon shift workers move 12% faster than morning shift, creating vibrations that interact with thermal expansion. The combination creates quality variations that occur for only 8-minute windows. Richard Morrison studied the chart with growing amazement. "Our quality control systems test parts after production, not during these micro variations." "Exactly," Maya responded. "By the time defects are detected, entire batches are affected. But if you monitor environmental combinations rather than individual factors, you can predict instability windows before they impact production." The questions came quickly now, and Maya answered each one with the confidence of someone who had lived and breathed these observations for weeks. She explained how humidity changes affected worker grip strength, how seasonal light variations influenced visual inspection accuracy, how the rumble of passing trains created vibrations that interacted with precision machinery in ways no one had previously considered. "This is extraordinary," Dr. Foster said, making notes rapidly. "You're describing a holistic view of manufacturing environment that we've never attempted to quantify." Maya's most powerful moment came when she addressed the human element of her observations. "I watch people because I have to," she explained. "I see when someone is frustrated before they know it themselves, when a machine operator is compensating for equipment issues, when quality inspectors are rushing because of time pressure. These human factors affect product quality as much as mechanical factors, but they're invisible to monitoring systems." Richard Morrison asked the question that everyone in the room was thinking. "Maya, how did you develop this level of observational ability?" Maya paused, considering how to explain a lifetime of adaptation in a few sentences. "When you can't hear warnings, you learn to see danger. When you can't hear explanations, you learn to understand by watching. When you can't hear problems, you learn to recognize them through patterns. Being deaf isn't a disability in this context. It's a different way of processing information that reveals things others miss." The room fell silent as the executives absorbed this perspective. Maya continued, "Every person in this company has different strengths. Jake Morrison knows machinery sounds that indicate problems weeks before they become critical. Sarah Kim sees quality issues that save thousands of dollars. Tom Rodriguez understands workflow inefficiencies that others don't notice. My strength is seeing environmental patterns. The key is recognizing that diverse perspectives create comprehensive solutions." Jennifer Walsh smiled with pride as she watched Maya command the room. This was the moment she had hoped for, not just validation of Maya's technical insights, but recognition of the broader principles she represented. Dr. Foster asked the crucial question, "Maya, if we implemented your monitoring approach company-wide, what kind of quality improvements could we expect?" Maya had prepared for this question with Sarah's help. Based on 4 weeks of data from our facility, predictive environmental monitoring could reduce quality defects by 40 to 60%. More importantly, it could prevent the catastrophic failures that create crisis situations like the one you faced last week. Richard Morrison leaned back in his chair, processing the implications. "Maya, what you're describing isn't just an improvement to our quality control. It's a fundamental shift in how we approach manufacturing monitoring." "Yes, sir," Maya replied. "And it requires combining human observation with technological systems, rather than replacing humans with technology." The CEO stood and walked to the windows overlooking Detroit. "This city built its reputation on innovation and problem-solving. We've been looking for technological solutions to human problems, but you're suggesting we need human insights to solve technological limitations." Maya nodded. "Technology is incredibly powerful, but it's limited by what it's programmed to notice. Humans see connections that machines miss, especially when those humans have learned to observe differently." The meeting continued for another hour, with Maya answering detailed questions about implementation, training requirements, and scalability. By the end, it was clear that precision manufacturing was about to embark on a revolutionary approach to quality control. As the executives prepared to leave, Richard Morrison approached Maya directly. "Ms. Chen, I want to offer you a position as our Director of Environmental Quality Analysis, reporting directly to Dr. Foster. This would involve traveling to our facilities nationwide, training teams in your observational methods, and developing standardized approaches to environmental monitoring." Maya stared at him, momentarily speechless. Sarah, translating the conversation, had tears in her eyes. "Sir," Maya finally replied, "6 weeks ago, I was an apprentice that many people thought didn't belong here. Are you sure you want to give me this level of responsibility?" "Maya," the CEO replied, "6 weeks ago, we had quality problems we couldn't solve with million-dollar systems. You solved them with a notebook and your eyes. I'm not giving you responsibility because of who you are. I'm giving it to you because of what you can do." 3 months later, Maya stood in the same conference room, but everything had changed. She now wore a business suit instead of factory coveralls, and her notebook had been replaced by sophisticated presentation materials, but more importantly, her methods were being implemented across all precision manufacturing facilities, and quality defects had decreased by 52% company-wide. Jake Morrison had been promoted to training coordinator, helping implement Maya's environmental awareness program for machine operators. Sarah Kim was now Maya's deputy, traveling with her to facilities across the country. Tom Rodriguez had become a vocal advocate for inclusive hiring practices, sharing Maya's story with other supervisors. But Maya's greatest satisfaction came from the emails she received from other deaf individuals who had heard her story and been inspired to pursue careers in manufacturing, engineering, and other technical fields. She had become not just a problem solver, but a symbol of what was possible when people looked beyond stereotypes to recognize individual capabilities. On this March afternoon, as Maya prepared to fly to the company's California facility, she received a text from her grandmother. "I always knew you were special, but now the whole world knows too." Maya smiled as she typed back, "I'm not special, Grandma. I just learned to see what others miss." Turns out that's exactly what the world needed. As her plane lifted off from Detroit Metropolitan Airport, Maya looked down at the industrial landscape that had changed her life. Somewhere below, in factories across the city, other underestimated individuals were proving their worth, solving problems in ways no one expected, and demonstrating that innovation comes from the most surprising sources. The young woman who had been ridiculed for being different had discovered that being different was exactly what made her valuable. And in doing so, she had helped others understand that true strength comes not from conformity, but from celebrating the unique perspectives that each person brings to the challenge of building a better world. Maya Chen's story had become proof that when we stop focusing on what people can't do and start recognizing what they can do, we unlock potential that can transform entire industries. And sometimes, the voices we most need to hear are the ones that speak without making a sound. This story demonstrates that our perceived limitations can become our greatest strengths, and that innovation often comes from those who see the world differently. Maya's journey from ridiculed apprentice to corporate director shows that when we embrace diverse perspectives and give everyone the opportunity to contribute, we discover solutions that were hiding in plain sight all along.